Since most parents are wondering early on in their child's education what their child's adulthood is going to look like and wanting to be planning for it, you may be wondering, when do transition services have to begin, okay? So here's the thing. It's one of those many, many areas of special education law that can be complex, but here's what the federal law says. The federal law says that the services, the transition services, must be in effect in the IEP that is in place when the student turns 16, okay? So, Julie, for most kids, that means that in the school year when they are 15 and that IEP team is meeting, they are developing transition services in that document. Now, this is one of those areas. That's what the federal law requires. Your state could elect to say, we want school districts starting transition planning sooner than that. So we want it to start at 14 or 15. But what they can't do is say, we'll allow a state to decide not to address transition until the student turns 18, because that would be providing fewer protections and services to the individual by state law than the federal law requires. But that's the upshot. Really, for most students, it's the IEP that's in place when the student turns 16.
And you know, Jen, I always like the way you explain it when you say that your floor and ceiling example.
Yes.
Say that.
So what that really means is that under our system of government, the federal government establishes the floor of requirements, and the state can create a higher ceiling, but they can't go beyond the federal floor, okay? So it just means that a state can offer more protection, more services to an individual, but they can't provide fewer or take away rights that the federal government mandates, okay? And that's why in that circumstance.
It's not that I didn't like your other explanation. I'm a visual learner, and so when I can have a visualization in my mind, I think that's helpful. But you know, the other thing that you need to know about transition is that when you get to that time where you're addressing transition through your child's IEP, we want you to be aware that it's coming. Don't forget about it, because I can't tell you, Jen, how many times, and I know this is the case with you as well, that parents have come to me to help me help them get them appropriate services for their child as a special education advocate. And I get so many parents whose kids are in their senior year of high school and they have just learned what transition is and that their child is potentially eligible to be educated beyond that typical graduation year, and depending on your state, how far in advance you can potentially be educated by your school district is different in every state. But what we don't want you to do is get in the position where you're not aware of this. You need to know that the transition is coming. You need to keep your eye on the ball. The other thing that I think I want to make sure that I say is I can't also tell you how many times parents have been in the IEP team meeting where they're planning transition and the paperwork comes back and nothing has been documented in the way that the team has agreed to. On the other side, you've been at a meeting and no one ever discussed transition with you, and you get back and you read all the documentation, and all of a sudden all the paperwork is checked off for all these things that have been done to determine transition.
Yeah, that's a problem. And anytime the document comes home and doesn't reflect what happened at the meeting, whether it's saying something happened that didn't happen or it's not reflecting something important that did happen, you should be on red alert, and you should be a little concerned about that and want to make sure you correct the record, for lack of a better way of looking at it. But so many times, as Julie said, I talk to parents and I say, so what kind of transition services have been in effect for your child? And they'll say, what are transition services? So we really want to make sure you know what they are, know that they have to be in effect by the child's 16th birthday, unless your state says earlier, and also know that just like all other aspects of special education, transition services are supposed to be based on the unique needs of the student. And so what parents should keep in mind is that an argument could be made that if your child's unique needs require transition planning earlier than 16, for whatever reason, you, I think, are within your rights to say, I think that we should be talking about this earlier because we know it's going to take him or her longer than those 3 or 4 years to learn this skill. So again, it's based on the unique needs of the child, so don't ever leave that portion of it out, right?
Absolutely.